But you see then, once we are up against this possibility that the distinction between what we do and what happens to us is obliterated. And therefore we would say with Hindus and Buddhists that if I run into a catastrophe, it is my karma. You see, that means far more than that it is a punishment for something I did wrong in the past. That is a legalistic view of karma. But a naturalistic or organic view of karma is, in fact, that what happens to me is what I do. And that in a certain sense, I want what happens to me. We can use want, notice how we use this word. It means to desire and it means to lack or to need. We say to somebody, you're wanting, you're deficient in something that you need. So it's rather alarming, really, when you consider it, that you always get what you want. Invariably. Even though you may think that it's entirely opposed to your wishes. But if it's your karma, everything that happens to you, put it in another way, everything that comes to you is a return to you of what goes out of you. Yes, obviously, that's absurd. If you confine the definition of yourself to your voluntary, conscious behavior. That's a ridiculous definition of oneself. Oneself, by any stretch of the imagination, must involve far more than the conscious and voluntary aspects of our behavior. And if we see that it involves intimately and inescapably the behavior of what we call the other, the not-self, the environment, and see that these two are moving together like the two sides of the snake when it swims, then you get a very curious feeling. You have to be careful of it if you've got a Western background. Because this is what happens to a lot of people who play around with psychedelic chemicals. There are many, many cases of inflation among these people. That is to say, when you get this sensation that the two sides of the world, the inside and the outside, are moving together, you may think, I am ruling it. I am God in the Western sense of the word. Therefore, your ego, instead of being, as it were, integrated and transcended with all this process, merely assumes vast dimensions, has megalomania, is blown up by the mystical experience. And so you get the holier-than-thou people going around who seem to think that they're above all human conventions and have no obligations to anyone or anything because they're divine and they can do as they damn please. What they haven't realized is that doing as you will isn't a new kind of behavior that you suddenly put on and say, from now on I'm going to go around doing as I will. You have to realize first that that's what you've always been doing. And you could look at this from a very simple point of view. It's not a complete point of view. But you can say, well, now what about the people who did good and who did the things that they didn't want to do? You know, everybody's mother said to us, darling, sometimes we have to do things we don't like. Well, what about that? Well, you can always say, the kid obeyed the mother and did the thing that he didn't like because that was the better part of wisdom. In other words, if he hadn't done that, something worse would have happened. And we choose the lesser of two evils. And when you find yourself in a situation where you have to choose the lesser of two evils, then you say, I want out of here. And you take the easiest way. You take the line of least resistance. So that's your doing. Now, you can pursue that more profoundly when you stop thinking about human behavior as something that responds to the compulsion of an environment. And you can get out of that when you see the behavior of the environment as an essential aspect of you. it isn't, as it were, the environment starting something, which you are therefore compelled to follow. It's the whole system moving together. So then, you get in the state of liberated or mystical consciousness, you very often feel that a hill is lifting you up as you walk up it. The ground seems to heave beneath your feet, and up you go. And you get this strange feeling of lightness, of effortlessness. Walking on air, never a care, This wonderful sense that there are no obstructions anywhere. There's nothing, as it were, banging you and making you do that. It all flows together. And that's a very common sense. You are actually, in that state of consciousness, you are perceiving the goings-on, the Tao, the course of nature, in the way it's happening. But in the ordinary way, you've been conditioned to resist it, to fight it, and to use those sensations of resistance to create a sensory basis for what you describe as the ego. The ego, in practice, is a sense of strain. When you are aware of I, you are aware of a basic discomfort, which is located basically between the eyes, somewhere in here, a sort of tightness. Also, it's in other centers too. It's in the solar plexus, and there are various physical centers, in other words, where this constant tension or resistance against it is going on. And that's what you feel when you talk about I. When that tension ceases, you discover immediately that the separate ego has disappeared, and that what I refers to is simply the total panorama of experience, everything that's happening. That's I. And obviously I don't know all of it, because I can't inspect all of it with my radar, with my conscious attention. That would be a ridiculous undertaking, to know everything in that sense. We know it in a much better way, as we know how to grow hair and open and close our hands. So, this point of view can be understood if we clarify the initial problems we have about it. And I suppose the first problem is, if we accept the notion that everything that happens to us is our own karma, our own doing, then we have to be very careful of, shall we say, the devil of omnipotence, of inflation, of feeling that your ego is what is in control of all this. And the second thing is, if you think then that everything that happens to everybody is what they really want to happen, then you can absolve yourself from any qualms about being unkind to someone, because you could say, well, the unkindness I did you was what you really wanted, wasn't it? You know that business about the responsibility of the person who gets murdered for getting murdered? There is a curious sense in which a lot of people go around looking for trouble. Freud pointed out quite correctly the psychology of accident-prone individuals. They seem to be attracting trouble like lights attract moths. And we're all doing that, but we manage to remain unconscious of it, so that we can praise and blame and play the game which says, that's not my fault, that's your fault. And so we go around apportioning faults to everybody. Because if we're going to apportion praise for what the good things people do, you can't make praise mean anything unless you also go around blaming. Praise and blame go together. Supposing everybody was acting in a praiseworthy way, and we praised everybody for everything, they'd get tired of it. They wouldn't even notice it anymore. So long as you're going to get a kick out of being praised, you've got to go around blaming too. It's very simple. But if you see the folly of that praising and blaming are just creating each other, then you don't praise and you don't blame. You just dig the whole thing. And that's why, when we encounter very great sages, you never hear them blame people, and they very rarely praise anyone. You try to start gossip in the presence of such a person, and you make a derogatory comment about someone. It's as if you had thrown a rock into a well and heard no splash. And a funny feeling, because that you get no response. You get no agreement. And if you praise somebody, there's also likely nothing to be said, except perhaps some remark that, of course, you're praising the beloved in all its manifestations. And this disconcerts some people terribly. I've always noticed that real sages never gossip, never criticize persons. And because they understand so well. The French saying, tout comprendre, c'est tout pardonner, to understand all is to forgive all, is so true if you are experienced in just the ordinary way of dealing with human problems. If you've been a counselor or psychotherapist or minister or anything like that, you very soon get to realize how vastly complicated people are, and to see that they really are in the messes they're in, not because of anything, but that's the way it is. And you stop blaming people, and because you don't blame people, you have open ears, and people come and seek your advice. They don't want to come to someone who's a counselor who will bawl them out. It's like dentists who simply accept the fact that people really don't take care of their teeth, and realize that the job of a dentist is precisely to look after people who can't be bothered to take care of their teeth. That's why he's in business. So a good dentist doesn't bawl his patients out because they didn't do this, that, and the other. Just accept it. Same with doctors. They know perfectly well that nobody's going to live by the rules of health. And they're very vague as to what they are. And, there's every kind of theory about how you ought to live, and what is healthy, but they change in fashion. And you ought to eat this kind of diet in 1921. By the time it's 1930, they've changed their ideas altogether. By the time it's 1960, it's back again to a mixture between 1921 and 1894. Something like that. You see, it's always changing. So, while the rules are not so... You see, if they were all absurd, it would be easy. But they're not all absurd. There's some truth in it, always. But nobody's ever quite sure. So the function of healers and doctors and so on is just to do what can be done to stop the mess getting too messy. And they must accept it as that. That's their job. If I were healthy, you'd say to the doctor, I wouldn't need you. So you're in business. Now, what about it then? We have difficulty in seeing this mutuality of our relationship to the rest of the world because it's contrary to common sense, contrary to the way we've been brought up. And therefore we have what I would call an initial intellectual block to understanding it, quite apart from any emotional blocks or anything of that kind. But obviously, we must overcome that intellectual block if we're going to go any further and actually realize and feel this way of life's working and this relationship between what you do and what happens to you.
To change who you are. That when you begin to apply these principles because you understand that they work, then it means then you'll believe in a future more than you believe in your past. And people who do the work are more in love with their future than they are with their past. And they're more interested in telling the story of possibility in their future than reliving the emotions and experiences of the past. And you know, the beauty behind all of this is that you don't have to be a monk. You don't have to be a priest. You don't have to be a rabbi. You don't have to have 40 years of meditation. You don't have to be a scholar or an academic. As a matter of fact, it's better if you're not. Because the simplicity of all of this, when people begin to apply it, is they begin to experience the fruits of their efforts. And I can tell you there isn't a person in this room that is so special to be excluded from this phenomenon. And that your thoughts literally have an effect on your body. That all thoughts carry an energy or a frequency. And if you believe that on some level that your thoughts have something to do with your body or your life, and you're thinking 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same redundant thoughts as the day before, it's going to produce the same measurable effects in your body, yes or no? And you are going to begin to emit the same energy and information in your field. And you are going to keep creating the same life. So then the same thoughts always lead to the same choices. The same choices always lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors create the same experiences. And the same experiences produce the same feelings and the same emotions. And those very same emotions drive your very same thoughts. And your biology, your neurocircuitry, your neurochemistry, your hormones, and even your genetic expression is equal to how you think, how you act, and how you feel. And how you think, how you act, and how you feel is called your personality. And your personality creates your personal reality. That's it. That's it. So if you wanted to create a new personal reality, a new life, you would have to change your personality, yes or no? That means then you would have to start thinking about what you've been thinking about and change it, yes? You would have to become aware of your unconscious habits and behaviors and modify them, true? Even what you say and how you talk. And you would have to look at those emotions that keep you connected to your past, because emotions are the end product of past experiences. And you would have to decide, do these emotions belong in my future? That means if you want to be wealthy, you can't take lack or unworthiness. A wealthy person would never feel that way. So most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. You're literally going to have to become someone else. So the principle in neuroscience says that nerve cells that fire together. So if you keep thinking the same thoughts, making the same choices, demonstrating the same behaviors, create the same experiences that stamp the same networks of neurons into the same patterns, all for the familiar feeling called you, then wouldn't you agree then, if you've done that over and over again, firing and wiring, emotionally conditioning and signaling the body in the same way into the past? If you did that, I don't know, let's be conservative, 25 years, would you agree then you would begin to hardwire your brain into a very finite signature? Yes? And that finite signature is called your identity. And it's a fact that by the time we're 35 years old, we become memorized to a set of automatic programs, behaviors, beliefs, perceptions, emotional reactions that function subconsciously. So then the first process of change then would become conscious of your unconscious thoughts, yes or no? And because of the size of the frontal lobe, which is 40% of your entire brain, the crowning achievement of the human being, the fact that you can observe how you're thinking, notice how you're acting, and pay attention to how you're feeling, the moment you can observe that, it means you're no longer the program, yes or no? You're the consciousness observing the program, and you're beginning to objectify your subjective self. You're no longer your biology. You're the consciousness observing who you are. Yes or no?
Yes.
So then the word meditation then literally means to become familiar with. That's what it means. That's the symbol. So then if you begin to become familiar with how you've been thinking, and you're so conscious of those unconscious thoughts like, I can't, what's wrong with me, it's too hard, I'll never change, I'll never make it, I'm too tired, nobody loves me. Those are the thoughts that are slipping by your analytical mind unchecked and beginning to program your autonomic nervous system into the same destiny. The moment you become aware of what comes out of your mouth and how you act, whether you blame or complain or make excuses for yourself or judge other people, the moment you become aware of that, if you're so familiar with that program, would you agree the more conscious you are of that unconscious habit, the less likely you're to go unconscious? Yes or no? And it would take an act of will to stay present and aware. Yes or no? And if you're becoming so familiar with the emotions that you've been living by every day for the last 20 years, that you didn't even know that you were guilty because it just felt like you. And it was so comfortable suffering that you felt really good to feel bad. But you didn't know that because that's just how you've been feeling. Yes or no? And then all of a sudden you become conscious. Oh my God, what have I been doing? The moment you become aware of that, then, it means then you're less likely to lower your energy and your emotional state during your day because you would become conscious of it. Yes or no? And what if then you decided, what thoughts do I want to put my attention behind? Let me review them, how a great person would think. What would be the internal dialogue they would have? And you began to fire and wire those circuits in your brain. And if you did that a few times, you would begin to install some circuits in your brain, yes or no? And if you kept thinking that way, firing and wiring, the hardware would become a software program, yes or no? And who knows? In your waking day, you may start thinking like a great person. Because the circuits are there, yes or no? And if you said, I'm going to master this day, one lifetime, how would an unlimited person live today? And you began to rehearse in your mind who you were going to be before you opened your eyes. The act of rehearsing mentally, when you're truly present, your brain does not know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here. And all of a sudden, you begin to install more circuits in your brain, priming it. All of a sudden, installing those circuits so that you have the hardware in place to act like that person, yes or no? Come on. And if you've done that enough times, would you all of a sudden start acting like that person in your waking day? Because you've primed your brain instead of to be a record of the past, that now it's becoming a map to the future. Yes or no? And then what if you said, now this is to me greatness, can I teach my body emotionally what my future is going to feel like before it's made manifest? Now, this is the challenge, because we've studied this so much. Most people wait for their wealth to feel abundant and worthy. They wait for their success to feel empowerment. They wait for the healing to feel gratitude and wholeness. They wait for their new relationship to feel love. Or they wait for the mystical moment to occur to feel awe. That means then we're victims to our environment. We're waiting for something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. And the moment we feel better inside of us, we pay attention to whoever or whatever caused it. And that event in and of itself is called a memory. That's Newtonian physics, cause and effect. In other words, if people are in lack, or they're empty, or they're suffering, they're waiting for some external exogenous condition to change how they feel. And what happens if it doesn't happen? They spend the rest of their life fighting for it, trying to controlling it, manipulating it, trying to make it happen because they're separate from possibility. But don't you know that the moment you start feeling wholeness, your healing begins? The moment you start feeling worthy and abundant, you're walking towards your future, called wealth. The moment you're empowered by a vision, and every single day you're living in that energy, you are going to tune into a new future. And synchronicities and serendipities are going to begin to happen all around you. The moment you're in love with yourself and you're in love with life, you're going to magnetize an equal. And the moment you're in awe of knowledge and information, you're going to have a mystical experience. And that's causing an effect. And so then, if science tells us that the environment signals the gene, are you with me? And all genes make proteins. And proteins are responsible for the structure and the function of your body. And genes are like Christmas tree lights. They turn on and off all the time, and we've measured this. Would you agree then that if an experience in your environment produces an emotion, and science tells us it's the environment that signals the gene, when you begin to experience the emotion ahead of the environmental experience, you're signaling the gene to begin to make new proteins to prepare the body for that future experience. Are you with me? Yeah. Now you're in alignment biologically with the destiny, neurologically, chemically, hormonally. And all of a sudden now, this is the beauty. If you're able to then maintain that state of mind and body, where there's physical evidence in your brain and body to look like the experience has already occurred because you're doing the work, then the magic starts to happen in your life, and it comes out of nowhere. Those coincidences, those opportunities that begin to unfold are unfolding because you're no longer living in the known. You're living in the unknown. Are you with me still? And I'm telling you, you're more alive and at your best when you're in the unknown than when you're in the known. Are you still with me? So then, if the brain is a record of the past, it's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. Would you agree then, if you're not being defined by a vision of the future every single day, you're left with the old circuits of the past? Yes or no? And if you are living by the memories of the past and you're not installing any circuits into the future, then you're going to be predictable in your life. Yes or no? Come on. And if feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you remember experiences better because you remember how they feel, the moment you wake up in the morning and you say, let me think about my problems. Oh, now I'm starting to feel a little bit more like myself. Wait, let me grab my cell phone and let me check my WhatsApp and my texts and my emails and my Facebook. And Jennifer's eating carbohydrates. Did you see that? Oh my God. And my high school boyfriend is looking for me. And the moment you begin to connect to your network of your personal reality, the moment you start turning on those circuits in your brain and you come back to your senses, and you get connected to those emotions that have defined you based on memories, and those emotions are driving your thoughts, and you can't think greater than how you feel, you're thinking in the past. Yes or no? Yes. And you'll keep creating more of the same life. So then, think about this. You wake up in the morning, your brain, for the most part, is in the past. Yes or no? Come on, poke the person next to you over there. And would you agree then, if you connect to a familiar feeling or an emotion, and those emotions are driving your thoughts, and those thoughts are creating the same emotions, and those same emotions are driving your same thoughts, and those same thoughts are creating the same emotions, that you're conditioning your body into the past, yes or no? And your body is the unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between an experience in your life that's creating an emotion and an emotion that you're creating by thought alone. To the body, it's believing and it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Yes or no? And the body is beginning to continuously get the same information, and it's believing it's in the same environmental condition, which means you're signaling the same gene in the same way. Yes or no? And now you're headed for a genetic destiny. Yes or no? And you've done nothing wrong. You're just taking too long. Because those emotions then will define you. And then someone will say to you, "What's up? Why are you so angry? Why are you so bitter? Why are you so afraid? Why are you so in so much pain? Why are you suffering so bad?" And you say, "I'm so glad you asked." And then you tell a narrative, the story of your past, firing and wiring the same circuits in your brain, working yourself up into an emotional froth to keep signaling the body into the past, reaffirming your personality based on a feeling. And the latest research on memory says that 50% of what you're talking about isn't even the truth. That you make stuff up. You embellish it. That memory is creative. And what that really means after all these years of studying this, when you ask a person that, it means that they had an event or a series of events in their life that branded them emotionally. And when they tell that narrative, what they're really saying is, "I haven't been able to change since that event. I've been altered from that experience." Yes or no? Yes. And they find people in their life that are the same emotion, the same energy, and they use each other to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion, and they get agreement for it. And they say, "I can suffer more than you can." No, I can suffer more than you do. Are you with me still? So then, the body becomes conditioned into the past, which means for the most part, most people's biologies are anchored in the past. And if how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, and you're thinking the same thoughts that are creating the same feelings and same emotions, and those emotions are influencing your thoughts, would you agree then you're signaling that same gene over and over again? And if genes are responsible for the structure and the function of the body, and you keep selecting and instructing the same gene, you're going to wear that gene out. Yes or no? Yes. Just like gears in your car. Taking a fax of a fax of a fax of a fax, or a copy of a copy of a copy, sooner or later it's going to lose its detail, yes or no? And that's exactly what happens to the body. The body begins to break down because those proteins are responsible for your physiology, for your structure. So then if immune cells make immune proteins, and you're living in fear every single day, you're living in anger and resentment, impatience every single day, then you're signaling the same gene in the same way, yes or no? And if you keep doing that for a period of time, sooner or later you're going to program that gene, and all of a sudden the body's going to get unhealthy, yes or no? Yes. And look, people say, "Well, I did my meditation 3 days and nothing happened." But I tell them, how long did it take you to create that condition? Tell me. So then if meditation means to become familiar with, you got to become more familiar with the thoughts, behaviors, and emotions of your future than familiar with the thoughts and behaviors and emotions of your past. Yes or no? So then if you keep firing and wiring the same circuits in your brain, installing the circuits, the hardware becomes a software program, and it gets easier to think in unlimited ways. It gets easier to act like a wealthy person. It becomes easier then to cultivate the emotions of your future instead of the emotions of your past. And our students, people in this work, Some of them have had horrific pasts. They've been abused, they've been traumatized, they have had very difficult conditions, and they stopped telling the story of their past. They started telling the story of their future, and they started believing more in that in their past. And when people come up to me and they vomit all over me about their past, I don't have a problem with that. I know that it's natural to do that. But I always ask them, listen to me. If you can't overcome that past in some way and you're feeling those emotions, you'll only talk about your past when you're feeling those emotions, because those emotions bring you back to your past. Yes or no? Yes. Come on. Yes. But if you're having a great life, you never talk about your past anymore because you're no longer emotionally bound to it. Yes or no? Yes. So then the moment you start